Clemson has a very specific strategy they're executing in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here. Welcome to Locked On Clemson, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. And we really appreciate everyone being a part of the show and listening in Monday through Friday, exclusive Clemson content right here for you. So if you're not already following or subscribing, make sure you hit that follow and subscribe so you can be an everydayer and stick with us. About 67% of you are not yet subscribed. So what are you waiting for? Get in there so you never miss another episode. Speaking of this episode, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, welcome in. This is not a panic show, and it's also not a celebration show. It's a what do we have right now, and what are we actually seeing from Clemson right now in the transfer portal? Because if you followed the Clemson Tiger football team closely the last few days or a week or so, a little over a week now, I guess 2 weeks into it, the reactions have been a little bit all over the place from the fan base, but mostly excitement, but a lot of questions about originally why only going after a ton of defensive players, why only going after a bunch of defensive backs, why going after defensive tackle. Where's all the offense? Why no offensive players? And then, suddenly Clemson got Chris Johnson Jr. and now they have a running back. So they have at least that on the board in the transfer portal. But what Clemson has done kind of seems a little bit chaotic all over sometimes. But when you kind of look at it from afar, but if you're just reacting day to day, it can be excitement, but also still some questions out there. But when you zoom out and you look at kind of the blueprint and what Clemson is trying to do, you can see a little bit about the method to their madness in the transfer portal. And today, I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit, explain what the plan is that Clemson is executing and whether fans are understanding it or not. I think it will make a lot of sense as we go through it. So segment one, we're going to talk about why this portal class started on defense. Segment two, we'll talk about defensive tackle and why there is some problems with that. And then segment three, we'll finish everything up with the offensive addition and how it changed the mood of this portal cycle. So let's get into it and get started. If you are frustrated that Clemson's portal class, has been so defensive heavy, I do get it. There are still fans out there and been in the comments that have said, well, hey, we only have one running back and it doesn't seem like they're very successful on the offensive line. And I've even agreed. I think they need guys on the offensive line. Some are still fighting for and demanding a quarterback. And I get that frustration that it seems like it's all defense and they just got one guy on running back. But it's still a lot of defensive focus as well. Because when you hear about new names, what are those new names? Mostly defense. And I get it. Fans want more explosiveness. They want more points. They want a better quarterback. They want fireworks. They want an offense that can strike fear in the defense. I get it. Clemson's staff really, when you look at it, wasn't building for the big explosive highlight play first. They were really trying to just survive, because they lost so many players to the transfer portal. They lost guys that were depth pieces, but they didn't just lose them in 2025's offseason. They lost guys continually year over year. And for the most part, Dabo kept replenishing with freshmen, and it made it even worse overall. So at the end of the day, because of that side of the ball being hit the hardest and being hurt the hardest by Dabo's ways, the defense had to be fixed. And also there's a coaching change that happened, and that's going to hurt a little bit as well, because the coaching change, really the philosophy was changed up. Wes Goodwin was still kind of running the Brent Venables defense. And, when he does that, a lot of guys may stay around that wanted to be in that type of defense, or that's what they felt like they would be good at. Tom Allen is not running that same exact defense. And so there was a lot of guys that wanted to jump from that because that's not what they originally had signed up for. So the defense needed to be addressed. It was about survivability on the defensive side of the ball. It could not be ignored, and it was the biggest sore thumb on the team. Whether you like to tell me that it's the quarterback or not, it wasn't the quarterback, and it still is not the quarterback, even with Christopher Vezina. But the defense had to be fixed, not just tweaked, not just coached up, because they tried to coach him up in 2025. They tried that. They tried to just tweak it in 2025. They tried that. But, it didn't work. And you couldn't explain, away the problems that were real there. And especially once they started losing players, it needed to be fixed and addressed immediately. A lot of times when you look back at 2025, you could argue that the defense or the player and the personnel that were out there did not fit what Tom Allen really wanted to do. And so it was a big concern for me that maybe Tom Allen wasn't a great fit for what Dabo wanted or what the players Dabo had. Ultimately, though, I believe the national census and the expectation from the defensive side of the ball is that they are better than how they performed in 2025. And Tom Allen is a respected coach who is knowledgeable and who is still a good coach on the defensive side of the ball. So Tom Allen arrived. It was very clear that he did not have what he wanted. And, I'm really not the biggest fan of the 4-2-5. I've been adamant about that. And some of you have called me out about, the 4-3 is kind of more of old school, and the 4-2-5 is more of what college football is going to. But at the end of the day, the personnel that Tom Allen had in 2025 lacked some key areas or key attributes that he wanted. He wanted range. First of all, he wanted speed. He wanted to improve tackling, improved range, and the depth that was just not there. He wanted to improve it. And he needed to, but he couldn't with the personnel that he had. He couldn't tweak the personnel that he had. He couldn't coach up the personnel that he had. It just was not working the way that we all really hoped that it would have. Clemson's defense in 2025, though, did not fail because of lack of staff effort. It failed because they just didn't have the guys to close the gap between the competition. Too many key players missing tackles, too many slow fits in matchups, too many explosive plays made on the back end and allowed. So, those things allowed the defense to, or really caused the defense to struggle mightily in 2025. So what did Clemson do, or what could Clemson do? Well, defense was the need. They attacked the portal with positions that failed the most visibly. And quarterback, while it failed with Cade Klubnik in a lot of ways, the replacement is Christopher Vezina, whether you agree with it or not. So, but there's not a lot of open and available replacements on the team on the defensive side of the ball. There weren't enough corners. There weren't enough safeties, not enough linebackers, and not enough defensive tackles. So they had to go out and address it immediately. Every portal ad checks at least one of those boxes: safety, corner, linebacker, interior defense, length, speed, physicality, production. Clemson had a targeted approach, kind of going after exactly the type of player they needed at the positions that they needed the most. Because if your defense can't get off the field, then you are forcing your offense to kind of really be perfect. And you also, put a lot of stress on a quarterback when your defense can't stop anyone. Clemson's first objective uh, was to get back to the kind of defense that we're used to. And it's not a defense that's winning shootouts in the Big 12, 38-35. And, Clemson had to figure out a way to stop giving up points and bigger plays. And that required not only a calculated approach at the defense, but also volume at defense. Not just starters, but rotational guys, competition at each level. And that's why you've seen so many defensive backs, so many linebackers, so many defensive linemen. Is it too much defense? No, it's not. It is exactly what Clemson had to do to address the problems on this team. And honestly, they still have more to go because there's still, some opportunities to add more players and still with the defense. It's going to be heavy defense in this portal, like it or not. All right, segment 2, we're going to go into the defensive tackle specifically and give you my thoughts there right here on Locked On Clemson. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. And that's why you should try Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding, mattresses, to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start fresh. Wayfair has everything you need from a full home refresh, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. We picked up a rug downstairs, looks great, came in quickly. It helps. Wayfair can help you get organized, get refreshed, and get back on track this new year for way less. Head over to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Thank you for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. Access to ad-free audio on Locked On Clemson, compatible with wherever you listen to major podcasts, and then you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Clemson. So go over to lockedonclemson.supercast.com to check out more, or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, segment 2 here of Locked On Clemson. If there's one position that needs to be recalibrated expectations for, it is defensive tackle, because the defensive tackle market is a hot one. It is very brutal. The market in college football right now is tough because there's not a lot of transparency. And those key positions like defensive tackle, which is what Clemson also needs to needs to replenish, everybody else wants them. Everybody else needs them. It's kind of like the top quarterback, and ultimately everybody overpays them. And Clemson entered this cycle already knowing that they needed to get players from the defensive line or on the defensive line. They lost guys that were going to the NFL that they thought they were going to lose. Plus, they lost guys that were projected to become starters on the team. And they lost depth. They lost leverage. So Clemson's approach to the defensive line has been a little bit more layered than some of the other positions. It's similar to what they're doing in the secondary. Very intentional, but having to look at guys who can contribute from starting as a starter, guys who contribute as rotational pieces, because they need both. And they've added different types of tackles from this recruiting class, or if you could say, I wouldn't say recruiting class, say portal class, right? One has more upside with length, one has more experience with rotational value, and one of the players can grow into more. And this isn't just about landing some big giant superstar. It was about building a room that ultimately can handle that you will be able to handle the schedule from August all the way to November and doesn't just collapse on this team. And that's why, you know, Clemson has been going after defensive line like they have been in this transfer portal. And I think that Clemson has been doing a great job so far, replenishing what they needed to replenish, getting in some fresh ideas, some fresh players, some fresh talent to be able to kind of jumpstart this defensive line. Now, we've seen this type of approach work for just about everybody else. And I think that's where a lot of the fan base, at least in our comments, are talking about, well, Morgan, you're bragging about Dabo and the staff, but isn't this just what everybody else is doing? And yeah, that is true. This is what everybody else is doing, but it is kind of nice to see the Clemson spin to the transfer portal. It's not just haphazardly going out and getting whoever is the biggest name. It's not just going out and trying to steal players away from other teams, regardless of if you're going to use them or not. We see that from other teams. Like they don't have any intention of actually starting this player or getting him in the rotation. They just want to keep them away from other teams, and they'll pay more money just to keep them away from you. And Clemson is not as involved in that kind of situation because the guys they're bringing on are guys that they want to be contributors, are guys that they want to help in build and improve the depth, and are guys that they can leverage and rotate through to, one, help Clemson out, but also allow themselves to kind of be more showcased from their past schools, going forward. So hopefully it's something that is mutually beneficial between both the defensive linemen and Clemson. And it's not just about chasing superstars or keeping superstars away from other teams. Clemson's got to figure out what they can do to be more sustainable along the defensive line. We've talked about it before. When you look at where did Clemson find the most success when Dabo was in that mix of national championship? Well, the argument could be quarterback was elite, and that is true. That quarterback was elite, and Christopher Vizina doesn't necessarily fit that role, but he can be functional if you can get a defense that is elite. Now, the other part of Clemson's trips to those national championships were that they had a very dominant and defensive line that was confident working along the defensive line with each other. And so Clemson has missed on targets over the past couple of years, guys who just haven't been good enough, and going out and getting into the transfer portal and being more aggressive on the defensive line overall, I think is going to pay dividends in the fall. If Clemson even didn't get one guy that they were going after, it's okay because they're very calculated with how they're going after and evaluating players. And not necessarily guaranteeing starting spots or guaranteeing a lot of money, but getting the right fit for the program and guys that can play more than 1 year has been a huge focus for Clemson. And I do believe that Clemson's line of scrimmage on both offense and defense has been very lackluster. And, what I like about Clemson's approach from the transfer portal in general is that they're just not trying to destroy the budget on one body, on one person. They want competition. They want options. They want depth. They want rotation. And they want guys that could be also long-term. And that's why they've been hunting after multiple additions, but they also needed to fill a lot of spots. So when you say, well, man, they're going after a ton of guys in the secondary, they have to fill these roles because they have these gaps. And while it may be nice to just go get that big time superstar safety or that big time superstar defensive tackle, what may be better in the long term and maybe even in the short term is getting multiple additions that can bring those things, bring more than just a superstar mentality to the table, can bring depth, can bring competition, can bring rotation. defensive tackle may no longer look the same for Clemson going forward. And it kind of is like that transition for Clemson basketball as well with Brad Brownell is now that we know Dabo is kind of forcing his way into or has been forced his way into using the portal more frequently, more realistically, if you will. I don't think there's a lot of going back from this, you know, and a lot of fans have said, well, I'm glad that he's given up focusing so much on graduation rate. And it's kind of sad to say that, you've got a college athlete or a college sport that focusing on graduation of that athlete is really a negative, or at least it's not improving or helping out your team. It's not even top 10 things that most fans think about. So what I mean is when you look at this team now going forward, now that Dabo has really kind of embraced at a level of the average of the market that everybody else is going after, this team's going to now, I believe, consistently have 10 or 15 transfer portal players year in and year out. And you could get to a point where there's a majority of your defense or even your offense that you didn't know who they were last season. And so kind of had to go through that realization with basketball. And I didn't like it at first, but if the guys work well together, can contribute and work as a team and win games, ultimately, I don't care if I didn't see him on the team last season or not. All right, hey, we're going to finish up the show talking about how the mood changed with bringing in Chris Johnson Jr., because I know everybody's very excited about that. There's nothing like the college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and right there in the middle of it all is you, and you're there because of Game Time. The energy, the bands, the moments. You can remember all of these things forever, but actually getting tickets, it's not always the easiest thing. That used to be frustrating. Long queues, logins, you'd forget your password and have to, reset everything and then wait in line and prices jumping at checkout. So you'd think you'd get something for a certain price and be cheap. And then all of a sudden it's 3 or 4 times the cost. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I have told you I've used it. I love the zone deals where you really don't pick a seat, but you pick a kind of a zone that is running through a special, and you get the tickets in that zone for a much more affordable price. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, welcome in segment 3, Locked On Clemson, of those everydayers out there sticking with me. So if you aren't already an everydayer, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you follow me and make sure you check me out over on X at the Morgan T Show. All the views and all the comments, I appreciate them all. I can't get to them all, but I appreciate them all. And I I definitely read them and I try to respond to them when I can. So let's talk about why, this feels different for me when Chris Johnson Jr. committed, because even though Clemson added multiple defensive players, and that was exciting to me, a lot of the fan base was very frustrated with that. And the mood didn't really shift to excitement until one player on offense showed up. Chris Johnson didn't just add speed. For the fan base, it sounds like there's a lot more belief now. And internally, externally, belief isn't just about, going out there and hoping you can win, but it is about believing in the staff and the coaching and the development and the program that you have. And that can go a long way, even when you're having difficulties. Belief in, what this staff is trying to do, what Dabo is trying to do, not just on the defensive side of the ball now. It is a defensive rebuild, and we've talked about defense this show more than anything else. But this move to get Chris Johnson Jr. told us something extremely important, that Clemson is willing to adjust and tweak its plan when the opportunity presents itself in the transfer portal. This is the kind of stuff that we had been kind of dreaming of for years and hoping for and even angry about. Clemson was not actively pursuing a running back. They reacted when one came available that they had a relationship with in the past. I was talking to one of my flight school students today while we were going to Charlotte, and we were flying there. And I said, Clemson got Chris Johnson Jr. and CJ really went after Chris Johnson, and it didn't work out during the recruiting cycle. And he said, I didn't really realize that Clemson wanted him. I thought he was just a portal guy. I didn't realize that they had any, a relationship. And that's key, because when you think about it, otherwise that was a whiff on CJ Spiller's part. And now it's one where you get kind of a second chance as a recruiter to go back and pick up somebody that you missed out on the first time through. And they weren't chasing after a running back. It wasn't kind of like glaring that they really wanted one. They knew they needed speed. They knew they needed to attack when an opportunity came available. And when somebody they felt like they wanted previously, that they knew they could fit in the system and that had the speed that they need, that is what mattered. And it shows to me that Dabo Swinney is not fully stuck in his ways, rigid, without any sort of budging. It does still, I would still say that Clemson and Dabo is selective, but that's always been kind of the calling card for Dabo, right? He's not just going to, do things on a whim or without thinking things through. And one offensive addition, while it may be just one at this point right now, can be huge. As we talked about, if he gets 10 or 12 snaps and just one of those he takes to the house, well, what is 6 points compared to the guys that you have on defense? How many defensive guys does Chris Johnson Jr. kind of account for or match up with, or is the equivalent of when it comes to player value? A few days ago, before Chris Johnson came in, I believe that many were kind of concerned that the portal class was extremely unbalanced. It was all defense and nothing else. The offense had no juice, but now they do have the juice. And suddenly the staff seems to be doing things more calculated, more selective, but also jumping when the time and the opportunity is available, but jumping carefully. Chris Johnson was not just a last-minute roster ad. To me, it's a signal of what Dabo wants, what his staff is demanding from Dabo going forward, and that is speed and explosiveness and an offense that needs players that are going to strike fear in the heart of the defense. Defense first. So ultimately, the strategy was what and is what for Clemson. Defense first. It was the biggest need that they had. And then speed anywhere and everywhere they can get it, even if it's not their initial first reaction or decision. And offensive players, when the opportunity strikes correct, when it's there, right? When it appears for them. There may be an offensive lineman out there that they're going to be able to get. I'm hoping that they can get two. Speculation is that they may just need to get one, but I would like to see them pick up two. But When opportunity arises for the offensive line, hopefully the staff will do exactly what they did with Chris Johnson and go after it and drop the money when they need to. All right. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Clemson today. And tomorrow we'll continue the discussion on all things Clemson athletics. Be sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Clemson so you can get up to date, stay up to date on all the latest episodes. In between episodes, you can follow me over on X at The Morgan T Show. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is for you. Get Locked On Clemson ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head over to lockedonclemson.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you watching over on video, we'll send you over to the first 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On College Football. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.